Good.
All right.
Okay, we are rolling. Welcome to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, telling the stories of nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. I'm Ruth Biggis. We are continuing our podcast despite the COVID situation. We are keeping our social distance, but I feel like we're gathering and we're together. And we are so fortunate today to have some wonderful folks from Commerce Bank here in Kansas City. We're honored to have Kevin Barth, who is the CEO and chairman of Commerce. And we also have Jackie Torres, who's the community development manager. Thanks for taking time to chat with us and talk about all the great things that you all are doing in the community.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. I told Kevin I would share this story of how we met and how serendipitous, meetings can be and yet be very impactful. So we were sitting on a parking spot bus, you could be a sponsor, both coming back from different places. And I think, Kevin, you had just come back from a spring training weekend with the Royals.
Royals, right in Surprise, Arizona.
And we had just come back from Spain, and I guess we started chatting and wondering if, what was going to happen. Little did we know the world kind of imploded on all of us in having to deal with the COVID-19 situation. But I asked for your card and I said, would you come be on the show and talk about what Commerce does in our community? So with that entree, share with us a little bit the philosophy of Commerce, obviously a full service banking institution, but how does that play out in the community sense?
Sure. Well, we feel very strongly that we're only as successful as the communities that we're in, right? And we feel a big obligation to contribute to the health of those communities and to be very involved at many different levels. And I can talk later about how we're involved. And then as we are successful, we feel a huge obligation to continue to reinvest in those communities and to sort of give back to the folks that help make the city great. But even more importantly, to give back to those that are less fortunate and that need the help the most. And that's one of the reasons why I asked Jackie to join us today too, because she's actually our community development director, and she can talk a little bit more about what we do with some of our outreach programs.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, Jackie, share with us, what are you doing in the community in terms of that outreach? That's a pretty broad term.
You're right, it is. Ruth, thanks again for having us today. This is kind of a fun offshoot of what I would normally be doing today, so I appreciate the time. So as Kevin mentioned, Commerce is a very well-rooted cornerstone institution, if you will, in Kansas City. And as such, we have a deep sense of community here and a strong commitment in that. We, in my world, in community development, really look to how we engage people and communities, so geographies and people, who especially are, as Kevin mentioned, maybe folks who've been left out of the full economy, people who are struggling financially. How do we engage them into the full economy? How do we help them with their banking and credit access needs? And then how do we help them, especially in the world of financial education? As you might imagine, there are a lot of people, not just children, but people who really are, for whom banking and understanding money management and creating budgets and planning for the future, those are relatively unfamiliar waters to navigate. And so if a banking partner can provide some of that education through outreach, we feel really strongly that builds better customers in the future, and it helps people build their financial capability and their economic mobility. And so we do a number of things to do that. First of all, it's kind of core to the Commerce Bank culture that we really do approach everything from a relationship standpoint. My work in the community is built on relationships, and maybe it helps that prior to coming to Commerce, I worked in the nonprofit world. that was the only world that I knew. So for the 25 years prior to coming to Commerce 5.5 years ago, I worked in the nonprofit sector. I worked for a variety of nonprofits and in a variety of roles. What I always, the commonality in all of those roles was that my career was really built on connecting a need to a resource. I was always able to identify a need in the community and then to find a resource to meet that need. And so I worked in the nonprofits, doing everything from volunteer management to program development to a lot of fundraising, as you could probably guess, board governance, strategic planning, event planning, you name it, I probably did it. And then in the latter part of my nonprofit community, I was really fortunate to be able to switch roles a bit, and I went to the philanthropic grants allocation side. So instead of asking for money, I was allocating money, which is definitely a change, right? So it was very helpful to me to have worked inside a nonprofit for as long as I had, or in many nonprofits for as long as I had, because I was able to really understand the needs of the nonprofits, and that they don't all look alike, right? Some are very strong. Some have really hands-on dynamic working boards who are very committed to fundraising. Some have a board of directors with very high level name recognition qualities, and some do not. And so being able to see a nonprofit and understand a nonprofit from the inside out was very helpful in the grants allocation side of my work. And then 5.5 years ago, when I had the opportunity to come to Commerce, it was a very scary leap, I will tell you that, going from nonprofit to the corporate side. However, what was so appealing about it was the ability, one, to bring all of the relationships that I had in the community to this job, and then two, to match those needs with the really robust resources that Commerce Bank provides, especially through that lens of corporate social responsibility. And so, you know, I started, I suppose, by listening and really understanding, trying to understand the needs of our nonprofit partners, those especially who work in these areas that I described of assisting people who are struggling financially. That is really my focus area. And then trying to understand how a bank could be helpful to their clients. And so, you know, what I was told is that a lot of times people are looking to help people who are struggling financially. They're being told, well, just build a budget, you know, just create a budget and follow that budget. Well, that's really easy to say, a little harder to do, right? And when that work, I see that as kind of, you're sometimes able to, it's a luxury perhaps to have the time to put into building a budget. If the emergent need is, what am I going to put on the dinner table tonight to feed my family, you may not have the luxury of the time to build a budget. So people do need a lot of hand-holding, I think. And so the organizations that are, you know the names probably, the organizations that are working with people the most in this particular space are those like Catholic Charities, Community Services League, the Guadalupe Center, El Centro, you know, I could go on and on, the Salvation Army, all of the financial opportunity centers, including the Prosperity Center at Rockhurst University, my alma mater. Those are all the great organizations in our community doing this hard work. And I am very proud to say that Commerce Bank we've been able to find ways to partner with every one of those organizations that I just named in this particular work.
With your work, and Kevin, with your overall view of the whole institution, how do you work together? And then the follow-up question, I guess, would be, what can you say to nonprofits out there that would really like to have the power and expertise of a financial partner, such as Commerce? You know,
Sure.
How do they go about that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I should back up a little bit. I really threw the ball to Jackie to talk about sort of the outreach work that we focus on. And there are a number of other ways that we work with not-for-profits. And one is just direct contributions. We contribute directly. And we also have a foundation, a Commerce Bank Foundation, that we make contributions from it to not-for-profits. Not all of those, the ones that Jackie talked about, but also we're focused on the arts and culture, higher education, anything to do with families and improving the lives of families, leadership development. Then there's the sort of the neighborhood services, and that's a lot of what Jackie does. And then we focus on a lot of youth enrichment issues, whether it's to help improve positive student outcomes or early childhood education. But so there's a direct contributions that we make. There's also just providing banking services. We work with a lot of not-for-profits to help them improve their cash flow or help them manage their expenses. Some provide credit. We finance a lot of facilities for not-for-profits. In fact, a recent example of how we've helped a lot of not-for-profits was the SBA's PPP program, where we actually made 547 loans to not-for-profits for a total of about $191 million. And it's everything from a zoo to an animal shelter to a mental health services organization. It's across the board. And so that's one example of other ways that we work with not-for-profits, is provide financing. And then maybe the one that's as impactful as any is we really encourage our bankers to get involved personally. And we have hundreds of bankers across the company and dozens here in Kansas City that are active in board service to not-for-profits. We don't tell them necessarily which ones to be involved in. We do in some cases. We ask them to be involved in organizations that we're closely tied to, but we sort of encourage them to follow their passion and their personal interests. And if they're going to be on a board, to be active on the board and to provide, use the experience and the expertise that they've gained here to help those organizations be successful. And to the extent they give their time, then we tend to step up and also provide financial backing to those organizations that our employees give their time to. So there are a number of ways that we work with not-for-profits. And then your last question about in terms of how do you get access to an organization like ours, it's really not that hard. We actually have a very proactive outbound calling program where we have probably 40 bankers here in town that are actively calling on not-for-profits. And again, it's all the way from religious institutions to some of the organizations that Jackie talked about. We're actively looking for opportunities to serve the not-for-profit community.
With the whole COVID pandemic,
yeah,
I think we're probably in the middle of whatever will be. What have you either shifted, or what kind of best practices have you been able to call upon, particularly in working with your nonprofit clients and beneficiaries?
The PPP program is probably one of the most active ways that we've been involved in, probably one of the best ways that we've been able to help not-for-profits, because for most of them, it's going to end up being not a loan, but a grant, to the extent that they use those dollars to keep their employees on the payroll. And so that's been the largest, most impactful from a financial standpoint. We've also worked with many not-for-profits, if they did have financing with us, to give them relief in terms of interest or year-end principal payments on their loans, and defer those payments. For right now, we've started out with deferring payments for up to 3 months, and to the extent that we need to, we'll look at other payment deferrals. We've also stepped up and participated with the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation and several other organizations on the fund that they put together, the regional COVID-19 response and recovery fund. We participated in that. We had a very active outreach through with all of our not-for-profit customers, just checking in on them to see if there's different ways that we can help them, and not by just what I talked about with payment relief, but just offering advice on how to manage through difficult times. And we've had a number of conversations with them in terms of how to continue with fundraising. Those that we've sponsored events for, we've encouraged them, even if they're not having the event, to still ask us if today we just met, we provide event sponsorship to many charities throughout the year. And we told them still apply, even if you're not holding your fundraising dinner or your luncheon or whatever, we're going to step up and we're going to go ahead and contribute to that. So don't think that because you're not having your event that we're going to shut you off. We aren't. So we're just trying to help people make it through what we hope is going to be a very short disruption in the way they do business. Because we know that although they're not able to have these gatherings and not able to have the fundraisers, the demands on some of these organizations are greater than ever. We've also stepped up in terms of our foundation giving in Kansas City. We've decided to double our giving out of our foundation, out of the Commerce Bank Foundation.
Wow, that's pretty tremendous. So when you say double, give us some dollars and cents. What does that mean?
We don't go around pounding our chest too much talking about the dollars, and we don't really seek a lot of attention for giving the dollars either. We don't do press releases every time we give money to an organization, but we have stepped up and we've reached out to especially looking at food and shelter, several social services organizations that have had issues, especially in the area of domestic violence. I'm trying to think, Jackie, some of the others: food, shelter, domestic violence. There's one organization that's actually it's a not-for-profit. They're actually making face masks and helping put primarily women to work that way, and we're providing them funding. So we're looking at many different ways to try to provide relief to the not-for-profit community.
Jackie, I wish I had your Rolodex.
Oh, do people use Rolodexes anymore?
I don't know. I shouldn't have said Rolodex. Boy, that dates me, doesn't it?
I used to. Well, I still have my old one, so I still pay for one as well. But no, I think only just to piggyback a little bit on what Kevin mentioned. As you might imagine, the COVID-19 crisis has really created a lot of new challenges for people. So for people who are already struggling financially, this has only exacerbated job loss and the possibility of maybe losing a home or being behind on the rent has really exacerbated their problems, and then the demands on those nonprofits that serve them. So we community development bank folks in Kansas City do gather frequently with the nonprofits, usually at the invitation of an organization like a Money Smart Kansas City or the Alliance for Economic Inclusion, where we can gather and hear the issues. What are you facing? What are the new challenges? Not being able to provide services in person has been a real challenge for a lot of nonprofits, as well as I understand. And then really one other issue that's bubbled to the surface is this digital divide that we talk about frequently for low-income people. When you don't have quality access to broadband and internet services in your home, it makes it very, very difficult to function in this environment. And then you think about all the kiddos who went from being in their classrooms to trying to learn at home. If they didn't have these kinds of connectivity abilities, it really did damper and put a lot of pressure on families to help their students keep up. And so, we've tried to listen to those needs as well. And so we're working with organizations like Connecting for Good, who is just, an awesome nonprofit working in this space. Particularly Tom Esselman and his team are working night and day right now to try to help bridge that digital divide for people so that they can keep up in this challenging time.
Well, I know in the banking industry, I'm sorry, Kevin, please go ahead.
I was just going to say we're actually working with a company they're in town. They work with school districts, and they've had huge demand from school districts to increase the connectivity with the remote learning, and we've actually helped provide them PPP funding to expand their capacity to serve a lot of actual rural school systems to increase their connectivity with rural communities.
It's amazing how some organizations have been able to do things that heretofore they probably didn't think they could do.
Huh.
What are you seeing at your institution, Kevin, and with your team, and the leap that they've been able to take with this totally new environment?
We have aggressively worked to protect our employees and our teammates and our customers. So we've been operating the last couple of months with over 85% of our employees working from home. And it's been amazing to see how it works. We've been spending much more time on things called Teams and Zooms than I ever thought possible. I barely knew of them before. But like this PPP program through the SBA that I talked about, we would normally, with everybody here in the offices working, we would close maybe 10 SBA loans a month and maybe $25 million SBA loans a year. With 85% of our employees working from home, we were closing at one point 500 SBA loans a day. We ended up closing over 7,000 of these PPP loans for small businesses with an average loan size of somewhere around $200,000 for a total of like approximately $1.7 billion with everyone working from home. We had over 800 people. We usually have 4 people working on SBA loans for small businesses. We had 800 people, most of them working from home, taking applications, documenting, closing, funding these loans. If one had asked me, is this possible? I would have said, no way. But somehow we made it work. And I think it's really a testament to our culture. And one of the reasons why we're able to do this is because we have worked so closely together on site for years. So we communicate well. There's a lot of respect for each other. And we knew if we really set our minds to it, we could do it. But that's been the most amazing thing to see, Ruth. That volume of loans that we made. It was usually we would make 1.7 billion. I think I said million. $1.7 billion in loans. It would take us 2 years to do that, and we did it in 3 weeks from home. Amazing.
Wow. So as we move forward through the end of the year, I know bankers like to forecast and be prepared.
Yeah.
In dealing with your nonprofit clients and the organizations that you support, what do you see? What's the landscape?
Well, one, I think there are a lot of things where people are eager to get back to their normal lives as quickly as possible. But I hope we're going to be very wise as a community and as a region, as a country, and do a lot of it gradually so that we avoid a second outbreak. So we're going to be encouraging, we're going to be encouraging our customers and the not-for-profits we work with to be very thoughtful and to follow the guidelines that were being provided so that we don't have a second outbreak, because that's ultimately, we have 2 battles going on here right now. We have the COVID-19 battle, but there's this other economic battle that we're dealing with, and we have to deal with the COVID battle first. And if we don't deal with that well, then the economic battle could last longer. So we're encouraging everyone to be very slow but deliberate, and we're going to work with them to provide them as much assistance and as much relief as we possibly can while they do that, because otherwise there could be a temptation to try to rush back to normal, right? Like I was talking about the events earlier. We were approving some today. I said, tell them they're not having we know they're not going to have their event in September or October, November. That's fine. We'll still be a sponsor. because we don't want them to feel like they have to rush to pull people together.
Jackie, any little word to the wise for the folks you work with as we move through the end of this year?
Yeah. A similar sentiment, I suppose, to Kevin's, and your question prompted in my mind the two organizations for whom I serve on the board. One is a high school, and so you can imagine the challenges of a high school returning kids to the classroom. And this particular high school, Cristo Rey, Kansas City, is uniquely offered for kids with economic need, and a part of their ability to be at the school is that they sign up for a corporate work study program. So in addition to being in school, they're working in Kansas City industries, Commerce Bank being one of them. We have 4 kids who work in our trust operations group. But if people aren't able to actually be back in the buildings working, it poses some real issues for our school and our business model, if you will, at Cristo Rey. So I had a board meeting on Tuesday with Cristo Rey, and we were really discussing what fall looks like and how will learning take place in person, hopefully, and what will the challenges be to our student population who already face a host of challenges because their families have limited incomes. And then the second organization with whom I work is Community Housing of Wyandotte County, an affordable housing organization who is facing a very similar instance that Kevin mentioned. You know, we're wondering, should we go ahead and hold our fundraising event that's coming in August? Should we actually do it in person? Should we do it virtually? Is the value proposition the same for our stakeholders? And I have to say, in both instances, the leadership at the nonprofits is outstanding. You know, I am just a tiny spoke in the wheel of these organizations, and proud to be so, for sure. And just really in awe of how people are able to pivot in the time of crisis and to make things work, and that everybody is being so very gracious. It's hard. I know with my own family, it's hard. With my own children, it's hard. I beg their patience every day, and I remind them that how abundantly blessed we are as a family. And so, I really am grateful for the opportunities that I have working in nonprofits, that they are so resilient. You know, they've had to be. Nonprofits have always had to be resilient, and given the current circumstances, even more so. So kudos to all of them.
Well, we want to thank both of you for spending time with us, giving us a snapshot of all that Commerce does, talking about how folks can connect with you. If you're interested, please go visit Commerce's website, commercebank.com. And in that, there's a million places you can go.
Yes.
Shout out to you all for I understand in 2018, your grants were 710 through your and that was just the foundation and not all the other things that you touched. So thanks for being a community player and being there for nonprofits. And it was great to see you all around the city here.
Yeah,
Ruth,
thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Welcome back to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit digital voice. I'm Ruth Biggis, and joining us now is Mike Meyer. Who could forget who you're with? Meyer Music. I kind of thought there would be a marching band, coming in behind you.
I can arrange one real quick.
That'd be great. We're delighted to have you on the show, and we're going to talk about something I know that's near and dear to your heart, and that's Band of Angels.
Yes.
It's not a rock group.
No,
At least
it's
I
not
know.
a rock.
Tell us a little bit about the organization.
Well, Band of Angels is a charity that we started in cooperation with Fox 4 Television about 10 years ago. I got a phone call from Fox 4 saying that they wanted to do something to start a new community program. They knew that they had been doing a lot of stories about the arts being cut and being underfunded in schools, and so they wanted to do something that would bring light to that and bring help. So I went down. My family has been in the music. At that time, they had been in the music business about 45 years here in Kansas City, and And so we have a real strong relationship with many people in the arts. And so I went down and just shared some ideas with them, and we settled on the idea of, that we would collect used music instruments from the community. They would get on air and promote that. And then we, Meyer Music, we call and work with about 60 school districts every week. We have 7 different educational representatives that travel all of those schools and see the music teachers and arts teachers in those schools. And so oftentimes those are the people that first hear when you have a student in need. So we thought, well, gosh, if we can get Fox 4 to get people to bring the instruments in, then we have the perfect facility to fix, replenish, repair, and then connect that with those students that would be in need. And need encompasses many different things. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional, so, and sometimes it's just that the student is a really great student, but extracurriculars would even in a good home not be as something that they could afford to do. So we started with that idea, thinking if we got 50 instruments the first year, it would be great. We got 300 the first year. And so far we have connected over 2,200 instruments to schools and kids. And then we started adding in some additional elements as time went on. We added in a scholarship program to send these same students that we'd given instruments to summer camps, music camps, and get them better and even more educated when they went back to school than they were when they left. And now we have evolved into college scholarships and doing many different things. So it has really evolved, but the basics of it is scholarships and music opportunities for students in need, and connecting instruments to students that would not otherwise be able to participate in a school music program because they didn't have an instrument to use.
And is this limited to a particular age group?
No, it really isn't. The bylaws of our organization say age 3 to 19, but we're encompassing students that are, violin kids that may start as early as 3 that are homeschooled, all the way up to kids to go to college. The bulk of what we do for sure is 5th and 6th grade kids starting music programs in schools, and then following those kids along as they go through each year. When they get into middle school, then helping maybe to provide them with a better instrument than the student level one that they began with, and then sending them to music camps. And then the eventual goal is hopefully, even if it isn't something that they decide to make a career of, maybe we have taught them a life skill, maybe we have given them a path to a post-secondary education, that they wouldn't have had before.
Well, there's so much research out there as to the benefits of music on the brain, and from a cognitive way, from an emotional way, et cetera. I mean, you're talking to somebody who loves music and sings, so I get that, and it's great that you're being able to spread that. Give us an example of the kinds of instruments that you get and what those would cost if a parent or family would need to purchase that versus what you're able to bring.
Sure. So we primarily focus in on the band and orchestra instruments that you would use in a beginning school program. So flute, clarinet, trumpet, trombone, saxophone, bass clarinet, baritone, oboe, things like that. Then on the orchestra side, violin, viola, cello, bass. A lot of the things that we don't really get into as much are drum sets or pianos, things that really aren't used in a beginning school program. Just to give a basic idea, I think from a garage sale or online perspective of, one of the internet marketplaces where people resell instruments, you would be looking at an average cost of anywhere between $350 and close to $1,000 for these instruments for these students. There is no shortage of things on the internet that people can see for $100. Unfortunately, our experience has been that those don't really perform well for students. They're very inexpensively made. They don't work super well. So we want to provide the kids an instrument that they're going to be successful on. And the construction of that instrument and the brand of that does matter. So about 350 to 1,000. Now, when you get into a student that's in a middle school or going into a high school, those instruments can quickly escalate into the $1,500, $2,000 range. And then we just had a young man from a school here in Kansas City that is going to Johns Hopkins University to study, and he was so excited that he could still play his violin because Johns Hopkins is right next to the Peabody Institute. So we provided him with a violin that would be representative of what he's going to need to perform with those types of students in college. And that was around $4,000. So it's very easy for these instruments to escalate into the $3,000 to $8,000 range when those kids are getting prepared to go to college. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about music instruments is that when students do apply for college or audition for college scholarships in music, oftentimes those auditions are held behind a screen so that the person listening doesn't know who they're hearing. Then it becomes all about the sound. Well, if you take a student that comes in on a subpar instrument and then that person is auditioning against a person that's playing on a better instrument, and they're both equally qualified, the subpar student is going to lose on the instrument that they were playing on, and they're going to lose the scholarship. So our goal is to make sure that we're leveling that playing field for those students. They're already, in many cases, coming from underserved communities or financially difficult situations. And now it's like, giving them an ice pick to go after an iceberg. You can do it, but it's not very easy,
So you said that you've been able to donate out 2,200 instruments over your 10 years or so. How many kiddos does that equate to? The same number of kids, or is it even more kids?
It's about that same number of kids. And we have also, since we expanded into doing music camp scholarships, we've sent 315 kids to camp, and that's the camp of their choice, because no one camp is going to fit every student the right way. We want to send them to the one they're going to be most successful and they're going to take away the most from. Those camp costs can range anywhere from, on the low end, $300 for a local high school camp when a student is in high school, up to, Interlochen, Berkeley, places like that are 4,000 plus for a summer camp. In those types of settings, those camps are essentially kind of the Juilliard of music camps, and they're putting in with some amazing, amazing people. So it's not inexpensive, and a lot of these students, that would just never be possible for them.
And you're in 60 different school districts with donated instruments to kids?
We do. We work with about 60 school districts across about a 100-mile area around Kansas City, the entire Fox 4 viewing area. But we've actually started to, expand even beyond that. So we have sent instruments to Arkansas, Texas, Michigan, Chicago, LA, New York. There is no geographic boundary on Band of Angels. It is essentially a local Kansas City startup, but it is able to, and the infrastructure is set to where we can go nationwide with anything. And what we have found is that it doesn't matter really where the student is, need exists everywhere. And there is no differentiation between, 18th and Benton and Kansas City and 1st and Maine and Stillwater, Oklahoma, or something like that. It's all over the place. So we don't really have any geographic borders. We try and keep it open to students. If there is a student that has a desire, we want to be able to serve that student.
How do you get the donated instruments?
The main way we are is through Fox 4. They have a tremendous reach. They have a tremendous voice. And they have been incredibly supportive of this whole program since the very beginning of co-founding it with us. They run hundreds of public service announcements every year to let the public know that we collect these instruments. Meyer Music certainly has a 50 now, heading into our 55th year of legacy in Kansas City of being in the arts. And so many people know about us. So they may hear about it, or they hear about from a friend, and they know that we are a place that they can take. And because we have locations all over the city, it's easy for anybody to donate. And then we even get school districts, believe it or not, who have instruments that have aged out. And we have a program called the 1-for-1 program. And basically that means they can take one instrument that doesn't work, that really is not worth repairing or repairable. If we have a like instrument or even a different instrument that they need more, they can trade that instrument that doesn't work anymore into us. We will give them one that has been repaired and is functional. And then we use those outdated and instruments deemed unrepairable in a really neat art program that we started called Art That Blows. And basically we give music instrument parts to artists. They create them into different works of art, and then we auction those art items to the public to raise money for the scholarship program and the other functions that Band of Angels provides.
I love that. Do you do that at any one particular time of year or all year long?
It's mainly been a summer event. We wanted it to be a really fun summer event. Unfortunately for this year, we're going to have to push back to the following year because of the COVID crisis. But what started as, let's find a way to connect with the millennial crowd. That was our main thing. Many fundraisers and I've gone to many, and many charities are fantastic, but the gala ball, the very expensive ticket, has been very standard. That is what they are chasing, the large donor. We kind of took a different approach at it and looked at it and said, there's this whole group of 25 to 35-year-olds that want to be involved in philanthropy in Kansas City, and they aren't far enough into their careers to have a super deep Rolodex and super deep pockets, but they want to be a part of it. So we really tried to frame this event around that group. And it was going to start as a concert in a coffee house with, hopefully we would get 50 people. Last year at Art That Blows, we had just under 800 people at it. And Hallmark here in Kansas City has been an amazing sponsor of it. In-Store Design Display has been an amazing sponsor of that event, and really helped to make a great summer event. That it's shorts and casual dress, and it's just fun. It's just a fun party, and the works of art are just amazing that you see, and you can see those on our website, on our Facebook page. We have those.
I love how you upcycle. So there's no dead instrument, right? It just has another life.
That's right. We try really very hardly to be completely green and be a zero waste organization. Right now, as we speak, there is a student who received a trumpet from us. He received a college scholarship from us, and he is in our storeroom right now, stripping instruments that are unusable and removing the parts and pieces so that artists can come in and pick those up and create pieces of art and jewelry and many other things. So that's another thing we really try and do, is we try and involve the students in our mission when we can. Many of them will come and volunteer at our event. Chris Hurd is the gentleman that I'm referring to, is here right now, putting instruments ready. And then anything that we don't use or really can't be used, we do recycle the metal in it. And so it's very little, if anything, goes to waste.
So Mike, if people want to know more of any of this, they can go to Band of Angels website.
Yes, it's bandofangels.org. And they can find out about all the different events that we have going on. They can find out about the different programs that we do. They can find out how to apply for an instrument. Perhaps they know somebody who needs an instrument. They can apply for the scholarships. All of it can be done online through our website. And we try and make that as easy as possible, because we want to remove as many barriers to the student and the parent, as we can.
So those instruments are allocated by an application, primarily?
Yes. Yeah, and honestly, we really tried to take kind of a Habitat for Humanity model in this. We wanted the students to have some buy-in. They had to work a little bit to get to getting the instrument. We felt like if they did that, then they would take better care of it and be more likely to stay with it. So the application process, the student would go online and apply. That application comes into us. We would contact the music director at the school. The student has had to go to the music director already and get their information to fill in on the application. Then we contact that director. We make sure the student is enrolled in school, and then we contact the parent and let them know. So between the student getting excited and getting recruited by a school teacher, they would have had to go home, kind of figure out, oh gosh, maybe financially we're not going to be able to do this. They would then go back to the teacher and say, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do it. The teacher says, here's an application. This is a neat source. Okay, I'll take this home. They have their parents work with the director to fill it out. Then they have to submit it. So by the time they do this, they've done 3 or 4 steps, and they put some work into it. And so the day they get that instrument, it's a red letter day. I mean, it is a wonderful day for them.
Of the kids that maybe start early, do you track to see who sticks with the program?
We do our very best. One of the things that we have figured out as we've done this, and I have to be honest, Ruth, I didn't begin this thinking that it was going to start into this big charity. This was an accidental experiment that worked. And so one of the things that happened right out of the gate, as I said, we thought we'd get 50 instruments. All of a sudden we got 300. Now we thought we'd have 30 students. We have 250. How do we keep track of these? Many times students from underserved communities and financially difficult situations, they travel and move an awful lot. So it is very difficult to keep track of them. But in the last 3 years, the charity and the supporters have grown so much for us that we were able to hire our community engagement specialist who can really help to kind of hone in on those kids and keep track of them and find them. Then through the scholarship program, we figured out that the email address is the one thing that really doesn't change much. So we're continually trying to email these opportunities to the students and then get the information to them that way. So keeping track has been the largest challenge. Early on, it's never been important to me, anybody's race, religion, gender, any of those, age as much. Just the idea that they had a need and they had a desire, those were the things that mattered. I have since learned that, unfortunately, there are a lot of grant applications that require you to have those things. And so while it isn't important to me, we have started to be able to track that stuff better. And as a happy side result, we've been able to track outcomes better of positive outcomes and success stories. So it's been good, but I had to be pushed, honestly, a little bit to embrace that.
Once a child gets an instrument, it's their instrument, or do they have to turn it back in?
It's theirs. It is theirs to keep for free for as long as they are playing music. We do ask, if they aren't going to continue, that they would return the instrument to us. However, we're not policing that. We figure that, even if the instrument got used for another purpose of some sort, it probably was necessary to be done. So, but many times these students, and I'll use Chris as an example, the gentleman who's helping today, he was a sophomore in high school. He had gotten a school-owned instrument to use from the time he was in 5th grade to a sophomore. Those instruments typically are not very good, and he was able to audition and make district band on a subpar instrument that he never owned. And the difficult part for him was he had to turn that instrument in at the end of the school year, so he had to then go 3 months without playing. Well, you're going to lose your chops if you don't do that. So this is an opportunity. Now the students don't have to stop. They don't have to take time off during the summer. They can continue to grow and learn and educate themselves. And that's a big, big part of it.
I would venture to guess for some kiddos, it's the first time that something of that kind of value they own. It's theirs.
It's very, very important. And it's funny because, and I keep referring to Chris, but he came this morning and to work, and the kids here 15 minutes early every single day. We've asked him to be here, and so I've tried to spend some time talking to him, And one of the things that I told him about today, he's cycling through some of those instruments that are older. They're roughed up. The kids were hard on them before. Because a lot of times these kids that are getting an instrument from us, yeah, it's the first thing that they've owned, but also they've been used to never having anything new. They've never had very many nice things. They're always used to hand-me-down clothes. They're wearing somebody's secondhand, and they go to school, and I don't care, in my opinion, that plays a part in their psyche. That's hard for kids. We all know the peer pressures of the kids that have and the kids that don't have. And so we're trying very hard to make sure that we give them an instrument that looks nice, that is in a nice case. So when they go into class, in this class, they aren't different than anybody else. They're the same. And they don't get that experience a lot. We've learned throughout this process. So.
It's removing that stigma that may be systemic, but this is at least a little way that you're helping so many kiddos. You alluded a little bit earlier about how COVID is kind of throwing a monkey wrench, at least into your big event. How has COVID impacted you kind of overall, and how have you been able to best practice and pivot?
Well, when life hands you lemonade, you make Zoom lemonade. We are trying very hard to pivot quickly. We knew that the minute this crisis started, two things were going to happen. Kids were going to lose access to camps, and there were probably going to be a number of kids who were going to lose their instruments because their families were going to lose their jobs. So I'd never been more happy to have started a charity than I was at the beginning of this pandemic, because I knew that we were already right there poised with the instruments and everything to help. As far as COVID, it didn't really affect us too much from an instrument perspective, because we work from August until about March to get all of the instruments ready that we're going to use for the program in August. So we had already prepared. We were ready to go. We were able to connect many instruments to students whose parents suddenly lost their jobs. From the camp standpoint, that was a little bit more difficult, but we got a wonderful call from the University of Kansas, who we send a lot of students to their summer music camp every year. And they said, we're going to have to cancel the camp this year, but we would love to do some type of virtual thing. And the minute they said it, I was like, I'm all in. 100%. Here's the things that we will fund. And so we are essentially underwriting that whole virtual camp for KU, with the exception of the expenses that the university would charge, for the staffing. But we provided stipends for the professors at University of Kansas to provide and create online content for the students to do. We are bringing in 4 artists from across the United States, with the help of companies like Yamaha and others, and we are underwriting that whole thing. It's very important that the kids get a great summer experience. We're underwriting a t-shirt for the kids that complete 12 courses in the camp, which should be very easy to do. They'll get a camp. We're doing a virtual bingo with a group called KC Crew here in town at the end of the camp, so the kids can have a social aspect to the camp too. And one of the really cool things is that it's allowed us to bring artists in that we probably wouldn't have been able to bring. So for instance, we have a gentleman named George Shelby, who's a Yamaha sax artist from California. He's one of the first guys. He plays on the Grammys, American Idol, Dance with the Stars, The Voice, all these shows. He does studio sessions. You've probably heard him on many of the movie soundtracks. He's going to do a live Zoom class from LA. We have an electric orchestra artist and a traditional classical artist named Mad Stolings from San Francisco, who is world renowned, and he's going to be doing a live class. We have the Barry sax player for the last 10 years for Beyonce will be doing a class from New York. And then we have a young girl named Imani Presley, who is a up-and-coming artist. She's 19 years old, Grammy nominated, and she's going to do a music producing class. So, those are 4 people where we probably would have only been able to bring 1. So we can not only do the same thing, but better and bigger. And
is this, go ahead.
I was going to be super excited because they typically have about 300 kids at this camp annually. they've had over 1,500 kids register from this from 46 states and 5 countries.
Wow.
So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
Band of Angels that's helping to underwrite this, or Meyer Music?
Band of Angels is helping to underwrite this, and by extension, Meyer Music and Fox 4 Television are, because we're the ones who are out raising the money to be able to make this happen. But yeah, Band of Angels was able to step in and fund almost the whole thing.
With just the little time we have left, what can the community do for you? How can they engage with Band of Angels and help you in your continual mission to get instruments to kids and the joy of music?
Well, the easy one is, if you have an instrument sitting in a closet or under a bed, bring it in. Even if you don't think that it is worth anything, can be used, if we will find a use for it, either in our art program or connecting it to a student. We are like every other charity. We've certainly been, from a fundraising perspective, hit pretty hard by this pandemic. And so financial funds, connections to grant opportunities would be huge right now. But those are the big things. We just need to keep making sure that we are raising money, that we are collecting instruments, so we can continue to fund these camps and provide these kids instruments from the beginning. And then kind of just, I always tell people, we want to find a student and then shepherd and surround them all the way from their elementary school years through the high school years, and give them the things that they need.
It's Band of Angels, bandofangels.org.
Correct.
And they should check you out. And, music is that universal language. We're so grateful that you're providing that. We want to thank you for listening to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice, produced by Charitable Communications. We're proudly sponsored by the Marion Kaufman Foundation. To be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities, visit our website at kccaresonline.org. Spread the love and find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at KC Cares Online. Thanks for joining us. We hope you all have learned something new.